All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Good timing there, since it looked like you were taking a drink of straight
Mm.
white lightning.
It's not straight, but just club soda and the Russian spirits.
All right, well, we are Tuesday, so it's my coverless book, Lord of
This
Chaos,
one.
and we did a lot of setup last time, so we only got through the prologue and the first two chapters, and we'll see how much we can move along with Rand and a bit of Matt here. Um, well, more than a bit, depending on how far we get, because it switches over. Uh, anyway, uh, chapter 3. There's a couple of interesting things here to me. A woman's eyes. Um, because the chapter is bracketed by that idea. First from uh Avienda's and the maidens look for Rand obviously avoiding her as he travels to the farm and cuts off the gate before Avienda can follow. Um, and then again at the end with one of the wives of the prospective male channelers uh, looking at him, blaming him for what's inevitably going to happen to her husband, since he can indeed channel. So if the war against the dark doesn't kill him, then he'll go mad and kill himself and others along with him.
Well, in some ways, because of the metaphysics of this world, she's right.
Mhm.
Because the coming of the dragon is why there are so many male channelers all of a sudden. So,
Yeah, and some of these, with the testing, Taim is shocked that I mean the first one has the ability to channel, and but all of them it's learned, so they would have continued to live their life and have never have known, never have had a problem with it. Just life would have gone on normally. Down the road he finds some with the spark, but none of these um, are, especially Dahmer Flynn. He's old, so clearly he doesn't have the spark, or it would have shown up already. So um, she's not entirely wrong to blame Rand, but then again, there. This is that problematic Jordan again, writing the male-female dynamic. Flynn and the others are doing what men do.
mhm.
It's the nuttiness of going crab fishing, even though it's one of the deadliest occupations. I mean, you're fishing, and yet you just risk a relatively high likelihood of death just to go fishing. Well, it's because the reward is deemed worth it for these men to earn a living, to provide for a family. That's what men do.
Yeah, some of these you get that vibe, but I think
Mhm.
in Flynn's case, he uprooted what was already comfortable, and
Mhm.
it wasn't that, well, we're refugees and we're dying and I need to do something. It's, I just feel the need to do this for some reason, and I don't even think he can really fully explain it.
Yeah.
But he's being tugged by things
Yeah.
that are much greater than himself at this point.
Part of that is the pull um of the Tavarin, but then Flynn is the one that's got the limp because he used to be a soldier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he took a lance to the thigh. Yeah, Grady is the other old guy, but older guy. Um, oh no, he's only a little bit older than Rand, but he looks older because he's a hardworking farmer, which ages you. Um, uh, and he's the one that Rand not kind of, he talks into staying, and that's why his wife is staring daggers uh, when he leaves. Um,
But also back to Rand and Avienda, we got to remember something about Rand. Single dad.
Mm.
He had at a very young age some motherly influence, but for the most part, single dad, including a very small blip where dad was going from Dragonmount back home. That's a very important time frame. You're born, you need mama, and all you know is needing mama because you can't even open your eyes yet.
Mm.
And somehow he got nutrients to this child, which we won't think too hard about that. Don't get lost in the details there, but uh
Chest feeding.
yeah. But baby could not suckle to mother's breast ever because he was
Hmm.
born as she died.
Yeah.
Uh,
And we don't know. I assume he was already married by this point because in his fever dream, he's talking about how Carrie always wanted children
mhm.
and they couldn't have children, for whatever reason. And
Oh,
then
he
he
came
finds his
back with
babe.
Carrie, didn't he?
Yes.
So she
So
might have been around as he's in battle
he
in some way,
so
shape, or
he
form.
he would have found her eventually, but yeah, there probably was a very formative period there because I doubt, especially in this war against the Aiel, normally you have camp followers,
Mhm.
which will include wives of soldiers, because they did a lot of the support work that we have, you know, actual, you know, active duty people doing now.
And if
Um,
that's not the case, the best case scenario, she's an Ilian at this point.
yeah, but she's got to be
Yeah.
a ways away, so it could have been weeks, if not months, where he was having to take care of uh, a newborn on his own before he got that, motherly connection.
Well, and
Uh,
even then, it was a limited motherly connection, unless she was somehow producing milk of her own, which I doubt.
yeah,
Uh,
because the implication from his fever dream is that they never conceived a child.
mhm.
Um, and and then on top of that, Rand barely remembers his mother. So you got to figure at the youngest three, maybe as old as five, that she died.
Mhm.
That he can, just as an 18-year-old, just becoming a man at that age, that would be about the time frame where you could just barely remember.
Well, what I'm getting at though is the your relationship attachment style is actually influenced to the greatest degree in those first few weeks, maybe a couple months of life,
Yeah.
because mama is everything, and how attentive mama is affects you 30 years down the road
Hmm.
on how
Well,
you
and
treat your
the
relationships.
the other side is true as well. There's a reason, there's a trope of strippers and porn stars have daddy issues,
Mm-hmm.
because that on the other side impacts how women uh react to and attach to the kind of men they attach themselves to, based on that being their masculine influence. So he
And
has
fact check me
almost
on
no
the
filter.
exact number, but women that grow up with brothers are like 3 times less likely to be sexually assaulted
Hmm.
because they learn how to read cues, masculine cues.
Even
And
subconsciously, yeah.
yeah, even subconsciously. And it's not that brother's always there to protect her, it's that she learns how to read men and when they're genuine or not. Bless you.
It's interesting you bring that up because I just watched a video this morning from a new channel I found called Echo Chamberlain. No idea why that's the name of his channel. Um, but I like him because he does short videos that are very like technical and detailed as far as art critique goes. And his latest is how modern Hollywood can't write males. They have a male character problem. And he goes into a lot of that idea that one of the reasons you had leading men in the past the way you had them, Kirk Douglas and the Clint Eastwood and those kind of guys, uh, was because that men were writing the scripts, men were performing them, and they had grown up with masculinity. The modern era of Hollywood doesn't even know what masculinity is properly defined, and what they think of as masculinity they despise. And a lot of it is that understated. Think of the scene in Jaws the first one where they're around the table drinking and telling stories. There was a lot of understated machismo going on there. That's why that scene works as well as it does, because you have three men there just being men. And then it's shot and written very well by men who know what being a man means.
Testosterone has dropped at somewhere around 1% every year for the last 20 years in young males. And everybody's blaming plastics and things like that. But there's a lot of other things that may be playing into it. And part of it is probably role models, probably comfort zones,
Stress.
uh,
The wrong kind of stress instead of the right kind of stress.
female pheromones. Women on birth control release less pheromones. Pheromones raise your testosterone without you knowing.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, all of these things. There is no this is the answer, but people who want to push the climate issue say plastics, pollution. Well, it probably is contributing, but that wouldn't be a cumulative effect over the last 20 years. That would be something that happened when we started doing that too much, and then it would continue on versus something that's getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, let's look for tiny nonsensical things and key in on that. Anyway, the point was Rand has and I hadn't really thought of it in these terms before, but our discussion here just kind of made me realize of you bring up the feminine. He's got that strong sense of honor and duty and protectiveness. That's the key, the protectiveness there that he gets from Tam. But he doesn't have that feminine influence to balance it. That's, I think, part of why he feels uh so destructively guilty when he can't protect. You know, he feels destructively guilty about the maidens.
Well, he's locked duty into a box. So
Mm,
the downfall of emotion is it can get the best of you and cause bad decisions. The upside to it is it allows you to get outside of your preconceived notions, your preconceived boxes. And he never had that emotional side that was the female upbringing. So his the exemplary of Rand's character is the flame in the void. What is the purpose of the flame in the void is to remove all emotional state from what you're doing at that moment, which is what you get from the masculine role model. Okay, so my stepfather, he was a big burly man, but he wasn't a man, right? Why? Because he was violent from emotion. He would get angry, he would get violent. He was sad, he would get violent. That's not a sign of a good man.
makes
A
me wonder if
man,
he was a single child raised by a single mother.
no, but he had a rough upbringing as well.
Mm,
So I do understand parts of him. It doesn't justify his
yeah.
actions, but uh the but the where the conscientiousness comes into it is violence is needed sometimes, but it's for the right reasons, not an emotional reaction.
Yes.
But if you never hold those emotions, you get locked into a
Mm,
box of reason, and you can't get out of your box of reason. So to him, women shouldn't die because of anything that I can prevent. Well, what's eating him alive right now? The list of names in his head that he's starting to develop.
mhm. Um, yeah, and it's creating a really bad negative feedback loop. I think I've shared this story before, but I don't think in our Wheel of Time talks that my my parents were believers in the spare the rod, spoil the child in the literal sense. However, they also understood, um, because my mom similarly had a rough upbringing, similarly to you, um, and they understood where and how that could go wrong. So before they even had kids, they had these discussions and they, vowed to each other to and hold each other accountable we do not spank the kids when we are angry. We cannot be angry when we do it. It has to be a tool of punishment, not a release of our own anger. And there was a time where I got in so much trouble, I didn't actually get spanked because they were so mad at me, they couldn't do it. They just even like the next day, they were
But
still so mad at me.
almost that becomes too conscientious, because corporal punishment in that sense needs to be swift to have the desired effect. It needs to be swift and appropriate.
Much like if you walk in and there's a pile of poo sitting on the floor, well, you can't go get the dog and rub his nose in it because you have no idea how long that's been there,
Mm-hmm.
and he won't understand, right? You have to catch them in the act.
I'm supposed to be the biologist. You're the one that compared us to dogs. No, but it's true. It has to, especially the younger they are. And a great example is, you have a child that bites, right? Not you specifically, the hypothetical here. And Ben bit once. Luckily, it was me, because I was there for the swift, appropriate reaction, right? He bit me, and it was immediate, flipped over right on the bottom. And it was, I mean, I'm not weak. And it left a handprint, which I was afraid of sending him to daycare for like 3 days. But it was just one swat, swift, and it was immediately after the bite. He never bit a single soul after that. We never had problems with biting. That's an example of when it goes right. But then again, I'm just vehemently angry, and then the kid does something. Well, then it can go too far. Again, now your emotional state is involved. Like, that bite was reactionary to the bite. It wasn't, oh, I'm angry, da, 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 and Ben did this, and now I'm even angrier, and it's just one thing building on the other. So it's the mix of the
Yeah.
emotion and the
It's the balance. It's what we've been talking about here with the balancing of the masculine and the feminine, and it's more than just his in the story. It's more than just Rand's inability to properly deal with Avienda and with the maidens and with women in general without, eating himself away on the inside. It's also in this chapter affects how he deals with Tain, because he kind of bounces back and forth between Rand, the natural alpha leader, strong, confident man, and uh uh the caricature, you know, the and I was thinking about this when I was going over it, and I've brought up a number of times the the analogy Jordan uses, which is the difference between hard and strong metal,
mhm.
right? And it occurred to me that here's a good example of that, and another way to say it is um a a strong man versus a macho man versus someone who's, putting on airs, a tough guy, a strong man versus a tough guy,
Mhm.
right? So where Rand goes wrong a lot of the times, and we kind of touched on this with his dealing with the nobles, where he was trying to be clever, is he has a similar thing with men in kind of a martial setting, where he's trying to be a tough guy, trying to put on a show of don't mess with me, I'm a tough guy, and it's not natural. We've talked about it when we talk about, when we've had sexy time with Sandra, talked about male male interactions and male female interactions, and the reason the strong woman character doesn't work is because it's fake. It's the same as if you have a guy in your circle who, always takes things too far because he's trying to one up everyone else, but it's not natural. It's not who he really is.
Mhm.
And so it comes off as
And
as
it puts you in an
awkward.
awkward situation. I'm not going to name who it is, but this person brought. I mean, it's little things. The little things are more annoying than it's when it's something big. Some homemade sausage, and I ate it. And I was like, man, this is delicious. This is really good. then they go in with the question you never want to hear when you're judging something. Isn't it the best you've ever had? Well, now you put me in an awkward spot because it's really dang good. It might be on the list of best I've ever had. But do I be 100% honest with you, or do I just tell you what you want to hear at this moment? But that same personality
Mm-hmm.
is also the person that jumps in with the next story. Or because to take that same situation, you're out and you have some sausage and you're like, wow, this is really good. That's the person that'll be like, but not as good as mine, right? Maybe you should try mine. Everybody here
Mm-hmm.
should try mine. And
And it comes from a place of insecurity. It's that's where Rand is um the awkward tyrant. It's because he's trying to be something that isn't really him. And I kind of mentioned this last time. You see this in this scene with Taim, where when he's talking just naturally, he has some things just kind of bubble up into his head seamlessly, like the golem.
mm-hmm,
He has no idea what that is. And then it kind of freaks him out because he realizes that didn't come from me, that came from Luce Theron. Um, but then when he goes in the tough guy persona, trying to, peacock against Taim, that's when Luce Theron jumps in as a separate voice and starts screaming maniacally.
mm-hmm. Which is, it's a sense of his weakness, but it's also something that makes him the right man for the job. Because I was thinking of the personality traits, and he's overly conscientious,
Mm-hmm.
to a fault. But it's also what keeps him sane, because people make a big deal about Rand's sanity going forward, but a normal, less conscientious person would have gone completely insane at this point. He's struggling with it, but everybody think about it. It's a death sentence, and you know it. And not only is it a death sentence, but you're supposed to be the epitome of it.
Insane, and probably in the very literal sense of mad with power.
The
There,
fact that he's staying relatively sane is a testament to the fact that he's able to
yes,
compartmentalize.
there's a reason why Taim and Logain couldn't be the dragon, even though they are both strong, powerful channelers. But they were not the right kind of person for this amount of power.
Yeah,
For
and
this,
Logain's a great example because he is very well disciplined,
mhm.
but it took more than just very well. It took someone who has that trait to a fault.
Mhm. Oh crap! What was my other thought? It's right on the verge of my brain. Um,
Was it about Tame or
no, it's about Rand, and so there's a well, you made me think of it with Logain, but that's a major spoiler thing for way down the road. I had another thought of comparison, and now I can't remember who and what it was, but uh, we what Rand is doing to Avienda here and pushing her away because he doesn't know how to deal with their relationship because he doesn't know what their relationship is. Um, and that uncertainty, it's like being ghosted. You drive yourself insane if you get ghosted because you have no closure. It's uncertain. It's why did this person stop talking to me all of a sudden? You're going to fill in the blanks. So he's filling in the gaps with negativity because he and Avienda is too similar to him, as we've talked about. That's kind of her dynamic with his three women, and they can't talk this out like, you know, a normal couple or even a would-be couple can talk it out and figure out where they're at. They just can't because they're too similar. And that's just going to leave him uncertain. And we we talked about this before of where we thought one of the frustrations and one of the failings is how long it takes for the three boys to get back together.
mm-hmm.
Um, and
And they
I
really
think that
never
was,
do
and
it.
they never really do. And I think that was on purpose. And it
No,
may
that's
be
that's
one of
that's
the,
on the spoiler side. So
yeah, that may be uh a contrivance, well, a rare contrivance on Jordan's part, because when Rand, you want your protagonist to have a low point so that they can have a triumph. Well, Rand starts to trend downwards the more he loses his support structure. And not only does he lose his support structure in like Perrin, he has to go deal with this thing. And Rand can't. So, he wishes Perrin luck and says, sorry, I can't go with you in the Shadow Rising. So Perrin has to go away. Matt, he kind of sends off. Moraine dies. He loses her, and Avienda he's purposely pushing away.
Mm-hmm.
So he's losing his support structure, and then he has to rely on the maidens, who he already has a rocky relationship with because he doesn't know how to deal with them without killing himself inside. He has to rely on Taim, which we see here in this chapter of piling so much responsibility and authority on top of someone who is clearly a sketchy dude, as
Mm-hmm.
we talked about last time.
I think let's put a pin in that thought, and I made
Yeah.
note here because there's too much to say there that's too
Mm-hmm.
spoilery. So we should address that at the end.
All right. Well, then let's move on to chapter 4, Sense of Humor, which is one one of my favorite scenes in the whole series is when Rand tries to tell a joke. And it's a dumb joke, but it always makes me laugh. Uh, in part because it's kind of a dad joke, and in part the reaction of the maidens to his joke.
Oh, where was that one?
uh, so it's after he gets to, so he's trying to decide where to go, and he's trying to avoid Avienda, and so he goes to Matt's camp. Uh, and wait, is Matt here yet? No, because
No,
Matt
because
is
this
coming.
this this next scene is the one we were talking about a while ago, where the
Yes,
guy gets the better of the girl
yes.
in the jokes.
No, Matt's not here yet.
Yeah.
Matt's coming to take charge, and so uh this is the High Lords of Tyr and a bunch of the clan chiefs, and they're on their way down to the border with Karheen, to in the build up down there that Rand's doing. Um, yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it goes about as well as you'd expected. So when he comes through the traveling tent, there are a number of Thunderwalkers there on guard, and they start, uh, them and the maidens start razzing each other, and one of them gets the better of, as far as the Aiel are concerned, gets the better of the maidens in their joke telling, and uh, this is um one of the most interesting uh, fields of study and topic of discussion in sociology and psychology and anthropology is cultural differences in humor. Um, there's a great example of this, um, in back when Saturday Night Live was good. Do you remember the so Alec Baldwin was the guest host, and they did a sketch where Michael Myers is a game show host
So Michael
in
Myers and
Japan.
Alec Baldwin were both on an episode and nobody died.
Nobody died. Um, so it's a Japanese game show. Everybody is speaking Japanese except for Chris Farley, who is a tourist who ended up there on accident. Uh, and there it's uh torturous and psychotic and weird, and it works because Western audiences know just enough about Japanese culture to know that they have some bizarre game shows and variety shows, and they love that stuff. And we look at it, and even with the translation, you're like, this is kind of weird, kind of creepy, kind of what the heck is going on here? Uh, and so it's a fish out of water thing. So that's why it's hilarious to us. And I don't know that they would necessarily get it because they would be like, well, yeah, that's just the game show. That's just what it is. So I don't know that a Japanese person would necessarily get it, even if they spoke English, understood English, because there's such a bizarre cultural barrier there.
Well, yeah, I introduced Ben to MXC and he loved it. But as you watch it, the commentary, the English commentary, is made to be a comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But you're watching it and you're actually looking at it saying, I bet you the original is even more weird.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's bizarre. I've actually
My
seen a
favorite
little
one.
of the original.
My favorite one. And next we have Tabuli Baba Ganoush.
Baba
Happy owner,
Ganoush!
happy owner of one of what is it? The owner of Happy Jihad one-way truck rental.
Oh man, you could not do that today. And that wasn't even that long ago. I mean, people talk about blazing saddles couldn't be made today. This was something that was made in the aughts, and you couldn't make it today. All right. Um, and notice how I didn't even bring up that, your wife and her people have no sense of humor. Um,
Sometimes they don't.
it is it is a it is if you've ever watched Monty Python, they joke about the Germans' lack of sense of humor a lot because it is
Well,
a
I
somewhat true stereotype.
Francis Foster, who does, he's one of the Trigger Pod guys. They're comedians, but he does classes on comedy as well, and he talks about the difference between humor in English versus other languages. Is in most other languages you don't have the luxury of a pun.
Mm,
And he's a multilingual person. He speaks, I think,
yes.
German and Spanish and some other languages as well. But the idea of the pun is almost non-existent in other languages in their
Hmm.
comedy. So they have to do comedy a different way. Whereas the English language, we play on words so much that it allows more for the stand-up comedian or for the improv.
I don't remember if I've ever mentioned this before while we were recording, but when I was in Japan, I met a guy at the language school I was at who had stayed there because he ended up getting married to one of the teachers. Giggity. And we were talking because I'd kind of finally discovered why I had such trouble with Japanese, which is I have an expansive vocabulary. So I'm trying to translate in my head. I want to say this. So, okay, I know this word and okay, but what is this word? Oh, it's the same as that word. It and he said that he has his wife, who is a native Japanese, who is a instructor, a language teacher, and because he did technical translations, he had like a 3 to 4 times larger vocabulary than his wife did because Japanese has a very small vocabulary in the first place. And if you don't encounter these technical things, you never use that word.
Mm-hmm.
Like he can't ask her for help because she doesn't know what that word means. She doesn't know what that is, because she never uses it because it's he's translating hard science journal articles for an English publication. And that was
Well, we have that in English too. I could use technical terms for fitness stuff that
mhm.
most people wouldn't get, but I don't want to
But
do
you
that.
might have at least heard the word before. You might not be able to define it, but you might have heard the word or a root word. You don't have that in Japanese. And it's very weird. And it was very kind of shocking because when I was, mediocre at speaking elementary Spanish, it was just because once I understood the grammar in my head, I could see the sentence and I could translate each word and then spin it around in the way it's supposed to be. It's a lot harder to do in Japanese because the vocabulary is so much more limited.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway,
Oh, speaking of jokes, since we tied with Wales
Mm.
yesterday in the World Cup, I can tell one of my favorite bad jokes. So a guy walks into a bar and there's two hefty ladies there talking, and he notices they have a British accent. So he says, "Excuse me, are you ladies from London?" And they said, "No, Wales." He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you Wales from London?"
Oh, that's terrible. I love it. Um, uh,
Okay,
okay.
we got to get on the story here. We
Okay. So, yeah, page 123 is when they get to talking after they leave and they're walking along. And I like the female dynamic here that's probably problematic now of women just look at things differently and they look for different things. Uh, he has a fine sense of humor. Who is he? That was Anila. His name is Liren, Samara replied, a Kosaida Sharan. You think he has humor because he thought your joke was better than his. He does look to have strong hands. Several of the maidens chortled. Wait, what? Oh, okay. Uh, and then you did not laugh. You never laugh. Sometimes I do not think you have a sense of humor. And then he tells this terrible joke that always makes me laugh.
uh I'm going to side with the IEL on this one. It is a terrible joke.
I love it. It's a great. I hate dad jokes, and it's a terribly great dad joke kind of joke. Uh, but Jordan manages to make it cringy and funny because the situation is cringy, but wholly believable. The maidens exchanged blank looks. Finally, Samara said, "What happened with the pond? Surely the water is the point of the story." Behind him, he heard Leah say, "I think it was supposed to be a joke. How can we laugh when he doesn't know what happened to the water?" It's like why the French laugh at Jerry Lewis. Who knows? It's just different. All right. Um, but he's actually here. There's again a sharp contrast because he's being himself. He's being natural. And yeah, in the end, he kind of gets frustrated because they don't get it, but he's at least being part of the group here. He's not just the guy in the middle that they're guarding.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets to the tent, and because the High Lords, especially Wiremon, is a turd, he ends up having to be the tough guy again. Um, and then uh the clan chiefs come in, and he can be a little bit more himself, because they have less affectations. They still are their own people and they don't follow him blindly. So he still has to, you know, go back and forth with them a little bit, but he can be himself a little more. And so they go off and just talk about, hunting and tobacco and Usquai versus whiskey and, and all of that, where he can be himself while he's still trying to avoid Avienda. Um, oh, but on page 131, there is something that should be considered that we can talk a little bit more about in spoiler talk because um, it does come up in the forums when people are talking about things of how is this affecting Rand. So on page 131, about halfway down, as for the camps, he knew there were still only 5. He had visited them in a matter of speaking. There was a place that he knew how to enter, a strange, unpeopled reflection of the real world, and he had walked the wooden walls of those massive hill forts. So we saw at the very end of Fires of Heaven that he had instinctively chased Ravine into the world of dreams, but he doesn't know what the world of dreams is. He doesn't even know its name, let alone any of the philosophy behind it. And Nynaeve is terrified. Moghidian is terrified. Nynaeve is worried. And she tells him that you're here in the flesh, which Moghidian's terrified by because that means he's stronger than we are, way stronger. And he's already stronger just because he's the dragon. But as Nynaeve tells Rand, you have to leave. You're here in the flesh. You're not dreaming yourself into here. And the wise ones all say that this is an evil thing because you lose part of yourself when you do that. But he's continuing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And probably quite a bit.
Which plays into our overall meta discussion. Is the world of dreams outside of the pattern? Is it part of the pattern? Is it the hub of the pattern? Is it the designer of the pattern? What is the world of dreams? And we talked about its connection to even other possible realities.
Yes. And how does that impact, and what does it mean that you lose part of yourself whenever you do that?
Maybe it's
you lose part of your humanity.
Maybe it's a little Nietzsche. You stare into the abyss.
You're actually in the abyss, maybe.
You're in the abyss. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
now you were talking about the power though, because then we talk about Ravine. He did it too.
the Forsaken all do it quite a bit. Yeah.
Except for Mohidian.
Somebody comments on that at some point. I don't remember what, but yeah.
I know we saw Lanfear do it quite a bit.
The Forsaken have no problem doing it. They have no fear about it. Because, and again, that leads to what does it mean and what is the mechanism of you lose part of yourself, you lose your humanity? Is it because they've already, does it have something to do with the soul? Because they've already lost their humanity, their soul, by binding it to the Dark One?
Maybe, well, the Dark One is distant from the world of dreams. Maybe so is the Creator. And you distance yourself from your connection to that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting thought. All right,
well, and even think of the heroes. They're bound to the pattern, but when they're not being used by the pattern, they're in the world of dreams.
Yeah. So there is a connection, but what is it? Jordan left it purposely, I think, vague. I think this is something he wanted people to think about and discuss. And if he had a concrete idea, I don't know that he ever shared it anywhere. So that may be something I have to dig into.
Or maybe he wanted it to be like current religious talk, where there is the unknown.
Yep. We'll get to that in a second.
Also plug 2 episodes ago. Go watch that one.
So the chapter ends, the last couple of pages of the chapter are good, because the maidens they clearly don't know what's going on here in the same way. And again, I hadn't really thought of this before, but I think this is purposeful. I think this chapter is mirroring itself the same way A Woman's Eyes did, where it's bracketed, it's bookended by those looks from the women.
Mm-hmm.
I think this chapter is bracketed by them not being able to understand each other. Because at the beginning, we have the sense of humor, and they don't get it. They don't get each other. At the end of it, they don't get each other, so the maidens can't understand as oh, it's okay. So 136, halfway down. Anala eyed him. If you did not avoid Avienda, so she would see that you ate. He attracts her interest, then runs from her, Somera muttered. You must attract her again. Why do you not offer to wash her hair? He should not be that forward, Anila said firmly. Asking to brush her hair will be more than enough. He does not want her to think him forward. I guess that is along the lines of he has strong hands. You do realize that neither of you are my mother, don't you? The two Cansor woman looked at each other in confusion. Do you think this is another Wetlander joke? And then on the last page of the chapter, he talks about suffering in silence.
Well, this
Uh,
is a theme before we get past it. You do notice that throughout the first up to this point, and then it keeps going from here. Every woman around him is trying to be his mother,
mhm.
and you don't see that with Matt. You
We
don't
saw
see
it,
that with,
we saw it all the way back in the beginning with Egwene's mom
Mhm.
being kind of his surrogate mother, thinking she was going to eventually be his mother-in-law.
But now you have people that don't know his story trying to do the same thing because he's given off that vibe that I don't have this thing that a mother would have taught me.
Mm.
We see it a lot with Sullen going forward.
It is a big reason why women are attracted to broken individuals. It's where the
Is that
motherly
my
instinct,
secret?
the motherly the motherly instinct is where the idea of I can change him comes from.
This is true. The
And
problem is we have
he
much more of
definitely
a
gives off that
prefrontal
vibe.
cortex than we did when we were babies.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, but like you say, before we get away from it, I think this is important too. So, 137. A great deal of suffering in silence. The maidens knew too much and not enough. In his own mind, again, because remember how Jordan writes, we're inside Rand's head looking out. He himself thinks of this as suffering, that he has to put up with this because of a debt and honor that he owes the maidens. And yet he understands that this is suffering. Rand is a cutter.
Mm-hmm.
He's not physically cutting himself, but he's cutting himself every bit as often and deeply emotionally. And he recognizes it, but he can't or won't do anything about it. And
Which is
it
funny
is
because you bring
definitely
up
taking a
cutting and
toll.
you look at the numbers. Men very rarely are cutters, but they have a much higher suicide rate.
We
And
also have a much higher risk-taking rate.
well, that's where I was going. I was going to say we cut in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
We put ourselves in situations that are painful based on our own uh, making up for our deficiencies, I should say, in this case and
Mm-hmm.
in other guys' cases. So cutting takes on different forms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a reason why so many men, even if they have no chance of doing it on a professional level, compete in contact sports and extreme sports and continue to do so even out of childhood. Uh,
It's why 9 out of 10 prisoners are men.
yeah. He climbed into his bed with a sense of relief that Avienda was already asleep, and some disgruntlement that he dared not light a lamp to wash, and she turned over on her pallet. Very likely she had been awake all along. Sleep well and wake, was all she said. Thinking what idiocy it was to feel this sudden contentment because a woman he wanted to avoid told him good night, he stuffed a goose down pillow beneath his head. Avienda probably thought this was the most marvelous joke. Taunting was almost an art among Aiel, and the nearer it came to bringing blood, the better. So again,
And again, disconnect between understanding. We started with humor, and he immediately deflected by saying this must be her humor.
and it's also what I was talking about was they can't or won't talk to each other. So we see a very literal and specific example of he's assuming the worst. It it's exactly what Egwene and Rand do to each other, especially Egwene. It's why they always butt heads, because Egwene is always assuming the worst. She never gives Rand the benefit of the doubt. Well, how destructive is that when it's someone you have been physically intimate with and want to but don't want to be romantically intimate with?
Well,
That's a deep cut.
he's doing the best ghosting job you can do in this time frame Because remember, ghosting works nowadays because we meet some people so far distant from
Hmm.
ourselves that we can separate from it. And all you have to do is cut off your social media ties and you've succeeded.
Yep.
Block their number, you've succeeded. He can't get away from her physically, but he's trying as much as he
Yes.
can
Yep. All
without
right.
an explanation, which is why it's ghosting.
Mm-hmm. Which makes it worse for both of them because they still see each other every day or pretty
Mhm.
much every day.
And even
So
though she's strong, Aiel, what I could picture in that scene, and which is what made it impactful for me, is I can see a tear in her eye.
hmm yeah. I don't think it is. I don't think it is too much to read that into the scene. We don't see it because it's dark and it's not from Avienda's perspective, but or at least watery eyes because she is a very rigidly strong individual that she probably wouldn't let herself cry. But we've seen her emotional before, especially concerning Rand. We've seen how emotional she can get about him. So we know that he's kind of being a dick here. But from his point of view, it it all makes sense. It all fits. And he can't do anything else. Let's pause here for a second and gather our thoughts for the next chapter. All right. A little hiccup there, so Grandpa could go to the bathroom, and we're going to try and get through chapter 5 here, a different dance with Matt, and then finish up with chapter 6 because Sammo wanted to talk about bad guys. Um, I, I rarely think anything is an accident with Jordan, and I don't think it's an accident that we have this Matt chapter right after these Rand chapters of Rand's uh, kind of personal turmoil that he's putting himself through in a lot of ways, and then you get the very sharp contrast with Matt,
Mm-hmm.
and the title of the chapter, "A Different Dance," and that dance scene where he's sparring, he's verbally and emotionally sparring with this young lady, and there's a little bit of that element that there always is with the boys of, every one of them thinks that, man, if one of the others was here, they'd know what to do. They know how to handle the ladies. Not really realizing or recognizing that, no, you're handling it pretty well. It's just, it's never going to go smoothly because that's just men and women are different. Probably not supposed to say that anymore. We've just been
Well,
canceled,
I
but
was gonna use the word smooth because the difference between the three is three different things that attract women
mm,
in three different people. Rand is tall and confident and authoritative. That in certain situations to certain people is, I mean, that gives you that air of this person will be the best provider. Perrin's kind of a softy. He's nurturing. He he's a listener. He's that soft side of a guy, even though he's big and burly.
mhm,
But then Matt he's smooth. He always has the right thing to say at the right time. So he just kind of oozes that intelligence that women pick up on because of the way you're able to banter words.
mhm. Uh, and uh, Betsy, the gal that he's going to dance with, is similar, and it's why they kind of spark, and he's attracted to her because uh she has a similar kind of cutting sense of humor and quick wit. Um, and there's an element of, and we've seen this before with Matt of, by golly, I'm not going to let these people get the best of me.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen that a lot in social situations, especially of I feel like I'm losing here, but I'm gonna go down swinging. Uh, is often how he feels when he's thinking that someone else would know what to do here. Um, so it's why he's able to do better than he thinks he's doing, because the challenge just, kind of brings out the best in him, if for no other reason than because he's stubborn.
Well, and I think that's so when you compare authors, Tolkien, Jordan, insert your favorite fantasy author here, and you look at the characters, and you can always find the ones that stand out, are special. Everybody loves Aragorn. Everybody loves, well, most people love Matt, and the reason I think people love Matt is because he is different than the trope. He's the witty one, but he's not the bard. He doesn't want to be rich and famous, though he kind of does. But he doesn't have, his personality is not that of Yaskir or someone along those lines,
Mhm.
which is the typical stereotypical writing of that kind of character. He's the witty one, but he's competent, not narcissistic. And there's a big difference. He gets the girls because of his competence.
I thought it was because he was dark and brooding and humorless. Oh, jeez.
I still love that the actor was the best one in the series. I'm like, yeah, he might have been actually. It's just that's not saying much.
It's also he wasn't Matt. It's to your point. He's supposed to be the lovable rascal, and he was this dark, brooding jerk.
Now, in defense of the show, there, and in not defense of the show, they should have done a better job of making it obvious. But that story part of Matt should have been because of the dagger,
But they rushed everything so much,
that you
and they
didn't get it.
never
That
gave
you didn't get a jovial part first.
we never
Yeah.
have that. Remember one of the kind of pivotal early scenes with Matt was the prank he pulled in Barlone, where he knocked the barrels down to get the white cloaks all muddy. We didn't get anything like that.
Mhm.
So but before he found the dagger, we
we
knew who he was.
we needed a whole episode of introduction, and for Matt, it should have been the badger scene.
Because you never actually see it. That would have been something that would have been um an acceptable addition because it's in the lore, it's in the canon, but we never actually see it. He just refers to it. But that would have been a very cinematic way
But even in
to,
passing refers to it, not even something memorable.
yes.
It's just like when we said they said Perrin was married. Well, it was like this minor little conversation that you're not paying attention to,
Hmm. Uh, and
especially since the scene was so loud.
yep.
Don't
Eh,
you picture a little DiCaprio with Matt, little darker hair?
Especially the memes.
Yeah.
The memes. All right. We also shouldn't go past I love the opening banter and discussion here, uh how comfortable he is with his head officers and how comfortable they are with him. That even though he's kind of rough, even though he's not courtly, they assume he's a lord. Everyone calls him my lord, even though he says I'm not one, and he doesn't like that. But because he doesn't like the airs and the pretensions, and yet because he's so normal and natural, they're all getting along, including Dyred, the head of the foot, who's almost certainly a commoner who rose through the ranks. And so he's not a lord, and the mounted aristocratic cavalry look down on the foot. Um, but they're all there bantering and talking and trying to figure out how to win their money back from Matt. And we get a callback to something we've heard about and have mentioned here and there, but it's actually going to start coming up a little bit more, which is they think horses because there's no luck to it. And he's grinning because he knows, you know, I know horses better than anyone but my dad because my dad taught me.
Mm-hmm. But I thought
And
his dad was a drunk.
I was trying to move on. Anyway, Um,
No, this is actually a stereotype that I don't like because it people have used it at me too, is you get a bad rep for being the chameleon, the person that can get along with all these different things. And I'm just like, well, there's another word for it. It's called the everyman.
mm,
The chameleon sounds bad, like you're faking, like you're changing your
mhm, mhm.
colors. Whereas you can be yourself in multiple situations and people still like you. That's different.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a good point. Um,
Nassim Taleb, it takes hard work to be interesting and virtuous. No, virtuous and yet still interesting, or something along those lines.
all right, so page 143 has a good line of what I was talking about with the banter and the interaction between Matt and Betsy. So halfway down, 143. Maintaining his smile was an effort. Bandying words with her was not going at all the way he wanted. He could not tell whether she was a complete nit or just managing to make him trip over his ears trying to keep up. Either way, she was still pretty, and she still smelled of lavender, not sweat. So, by golly, he's not going to give up. He's going to keep trying. Uh, and we also get you know, the thing that seems different and out of character because it came from the old memories, but it's not really. It's something you kind of brought up last time or the time before that we already knew this was his character. This was him running off into the night in the middle of a thunderstorm to rescue the girls. This was going down into the, most secure castle in 3,000 years and then having them be snitty to him and him yelling that he's not going to pull their bacon out of the fire again. And then a second later, looking at Julian and saying, well, come on, and chasing after the girls. We
Well,
already knew this is
and
who he was. It's just now we're doing it the same thing, but at a much higher level for bigger stakes.
even more to the specific situation here, it's one thing to know a dance, it's another thing to do it.
Oh, but that I wasn't even talking about that, but
Oh,
that's a good point too, that he, you know, uh he was a dancer. He was a partier. He was a party boy. So he's able to see it in his mind and it translates to his steps. I was talking about when uh whoever it uh is it Esteen who comes in because he's got to make the rounds and he doesn't want to stop. He'd rather sit there and keep dancing with Betsy and maybe dance her into a private room. But he knows from these other people's memories
don't
that
do it, Matt. There's no birth control yet.
he knows from the other people's memories that this is important. This has to be done. Uh uh because it pays dividends down the road when it's literally life or death. And so he pulls himself away, reluctantly, but that's who he is. He's going to grumble about it. He's going to complain about it. He's going to be annoyed that Rand put him in this situation where he's in charge, but then he's going to do it. Uh, which conveniently leads to um meeting Olver.
Oh, yes.
Oh, well, before we get there, when he leaves Betsy, we get a recurring theme. Page 147. Does Daughter of the Nine Moons mean anything to you? It's like, I like you, you like me, but wait a minute.
Okay, so on the too personal thing, I knew for a long time I had an older sister that I didn't know because my dad had a kid before he was with my mother, and basically the family just said, "Go away, and you never have to have anything to do with her," kind of thing. So when I was single and I was dating, I always liked women a little bit older than myself. So my first question sometimes was, "Who's your daddy, and what does he do?"
Who is your daddy and what does he do?
Yeah. I mean, no, seriously, because I knew it was just my luck that I would end up dating my sister. And it never happened. And I finally met her, so I know what she looks like, and I never have. So but still, there was that little bit of paranoia in your head. It was like, okay, so how many years older than me is she? Oh crap. Do you know your dad? What kind of question is that?
Uh, that's not, yeah. Uh, a Dorian, not a Steen. Okay, it's a Dorian. Anyway, so we get some good world building of, just in a couple of few pages, Jordan gives us a good picture of what's been going on with the world outside of the main characters, which is, where we've seen everything. And it mirrors in a lot of ways what the girls were seeing over in brain fart, Tanchico. Kind of similar kind of thing. Um, all right, so page 154. This is a little thing, but it's adding to the looking sideways at everybody. So halfway down, 154. There's also a rumor the Lord Dragon was in the town yesterday, Adorian said, as softly as the street noise would allow. The biggest thing that happened yesterday, Matt said wryly, was I had my first bath in a week. Now, come on, it's going to take half of what daylight is left to finish as it is. He would have given a pretty to find out how that rumor began, only off by half a day, and there certainly had been no one to see. So we get two things here in this scene, which goes into italics because we're getting a flashback here. So how in the Sam Hill did this rumor get going? And what does that say about rumor and news and who knows what and who sees what in this world where you're looking sideways at everybody wondering if they're a dark friend?
Yeah, this is also where Rand hasn't learned an important lesson. Don't randomly open gateways.
Yep. Um, so there's another interesting thing going on here where you get Rand from Matt's perspective, and he's still the Matt from the Great Hunt when they found out he's the dragon and blood and bloody ashes. No offense, but I'm going to sleep far away from you. I'm going to go on the other side of the camp because, and he didn't. He didn't mean to be a jerk, but he was being a jerk. That's why Perrin kind of slugged him.
Well, yeah. Back to the gateways, though. The reason Rand had to travel to him was what would almost kill him, not being close to him just in person. Bad decision, Matt. You're not always right. Luckily, you're lucky.
Mm-hmm. But this is where they need the three of them to really help because Matt isn't any help to Rand on his own. Because Matt is, to borrow something we're going to see down the road, the truth speaker. He says what is the way it is in just about the bluntest way possible. So he needs Perrin to balance that. That's why I think they're, the kind of the pinnacle of the three of them together, the three legs of the stool, was that scene in The Great Hunt where they find him looking at the dragon banner. And Matt's being loud and himself, and Perrin is just squatting there looking at the banner thinking. And then he finally says, Rand, can you channel? Because he's thought it through. And then they're going to have a discussion, and Matt's going to say the blunt things, but Perrin is going to balance it with, yeah, but he's still our friend. And
Yeah,
you don't get that here.
I'll agree and disagree. I'll agree Matt needs Perrin here.
Mm.
But Rand needed the person who's going to be blunt with him at this point.
True, but it would have gone a lot farther if Perrin was there to reinforce the bluntness with some thoughtfulness. There's also an interesting dynamic here that the other problem is that they're guys. So I rode with a friend down there to go to the Eagles Texcants game, and I get back and the waifu is asking me all these questions because I haven't seen the guy in years. We just, game and we talk online, and it's, well, what's he doing now? Where's he working? Is he dating anyone? And I'm like, I don't know. It didn't come up. Well, what did you talk about? Stuff.
See,
That's what
I can
guys do.
answer those questions because I ask those questions. But I am a little girly sometimes. So
And there's a great Bill Engvall bit about it of like where he's I was at the gym and with this guy, and did you know they're getting divorced? Oh, really? What happened? I don't know. You didn't ask? No. What'd you say? Spot me. So I was about to bench press. That's just how guys work.
uh,
So Matt's not
this is
going
why I
to.
get along with women better than you.
This is true. You need that little bit of femininity. We've talked about that before. We talked about it just now with Rand. But Matt can see that Rand needs help. He can see what's going on, but he's not he's not going to take that extra step. He's gonna tell the truth. He's gonna say bluntly what needs to be said, but he's not going to dig into Rand's personal life if Rand doesn't offer. And that's what's going on here with the turmoil that Matt can clearly see that
Well,
that Rand is in.
which is also it is a feminine trait in Matt. It's the you're never around for your family. And then the guy is going, what does that even mean? What do you mean by that? Never mind, and goes to bed.
Yeah.
Women will say the blunt thing, but then when you kind of need to process it to man speak, never mind. You should know.
Mhm. Uh, and then we get to Matt thumping some obnoxious turds who are about to whip a boy, and he does. I'm wondering uh if there was a specific influence to this scene, because this scene always reminds me of the scene from Lonesome Dove where Tommy Lee Jones beats the crap out of this cavalry officer. Um, because he's trying to take this horse and oh, the kid from Silver Spoons, Richie, what's his face? Crap, can't remember. Anyway, he's in it. And so this cavalry officer is horse whipping Ricky Schroeder uh because he won't give up the horse, and Tommy Lee Jones comes out and beats the ever living crap out of this cavalry captain, and everyone, including the captain's officers, are just staring at him dumbstruck, and he just turns around and goes, I hate rudeness in a man. I won't tolerate it. And I always think of that scene when I read this of, okay, you're being dicks. So I'm going to thump you. I'm going to give you a concussion and some bruises because it's the least you deserve.
So I just called Matt feminine, but I'm going to in less than 30 seconds call him an alpha male, because even in non-human primates, people think of the alpha male as the guy who wins all the fights. The alpha male in most primate societies is the male that breaks up unfair fights.
He's the protector of the clan,
Mhm.
not the buffest guy in the clan.
Usually you have to be one of the buffest guys in
Yeah,
the
now
clan.
usually that's going to be one
Yeah.
and the same, but you can't just be, and you've talked about this before, you can't just be a tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
That the females will turn their backs on you and groom the beta if you're a tyrant.
He's a pretty fast reader. Maybe trying to think what the best way to get a message that he'll actually read is. Let's get Jordan Peterson to read Robert Jordan and psychoanalyze the boys.
Yeah, man, those be some cool videos. Be as awesome as his Bible ones.
No,
Uh,
like no, you listen to his like Peter Pan
mm,
and those the lessons in those stories. Pinocchio. I think he could do the same thing with
mm.
this, except in much more depth.
Pause for a second. Speaking of male and female dynamics, that was a hiccup because the wife was telling me, "Hey, hurry up, you got to go to your appointment." That I moved to next week so that I wouldn't have it in the way today, which I told her about. And she says, "No, you didn't." And yes, I did. No, you didn't. But that's how it goes. Okay, to your point that you were just making, that this really it ties right back to what you were saying about the controlled violence, that violence as a tool of, all right, I'm going to try and talk to you. I'm going to be reasonable and authoritative, but you're not listening. So now I've got to swat you because you have demonstrated that's the only way you're going to learn your lesson.
Mhm.
And that's what Matt does is swat. And there really is a fatherly dynamic there that I think was on purpose because he administers the corporal punishment to the jerks, but then there's the other side of the fatherliness, even though he he claims not to, this isn't who I am, and this is, but he's very fatherly with Olver, and he's that way immediately, where he. So there's a problem with modern parenting that numerous intelligent and expert people have commented on, which is bargaining with your children. That's not what Matt's doing here. It kind of seems like it on the surface, but he's being very authoritative. He's saying, "This is what's going to happen, Olver," but he gets down on a knee to address him directly, apologizes. "I'm sorry, I always hated it when adults talked over my head and talked past me too. So I'm going to talk directly to you. Okay. I'm going to create a connection here, but I'm not bargaining with you. This is what's going to happen, but I'm going to do it in a way that uh, doesn't make it feel like I'm being a tyrant to
Well, since we know that Matt didn't have good male role models, it must be another
you."
example of you will know it when it happens. Please, everybody, read the sarcasm. There.
Why is everything? This is the worst timeline to live in. I am voting for Sweet Meteor of Death in 2024. Come on, I think he can do it this year. All right. Uh, that pretty much does that, except that there's a sea folk ship in the river that he runs out to try and deal with, and then they run away. So that's just a little nugget that'll come into play later. Uh, and then he ends it by being very Matt of, we're gonna stay up all night drinking and dancing, and then I'm gonna drop a bombshell on my officers of, all right, I'm gonna get a couple hours of sleep. Y'all go get everyone ready to move. Because we're gonna be on the road before first light. And then he quotes a long dead general whose book he read once in literally a different life. Uh, and then we get to the bad guys. Threads woven of shadow, and the snaky icon. Uh, there's a lot of layers here.
Mm-hmm. Especially
Because
since we finally get Samael's point of view.
we get his point of view, and we get him interacting with Grendel. So we get a lot of her, who we've only seen, from the outside before, and uh, and we get his perspective on her, as well. We also get another little blurb at the end with Semirhage. Uh, is this also, do we get Grendel's perspective here too, or does that happen later?
We get 181. It
Yep,
switches
there
to
we go.
Greandal.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it does. Yeah, this is the chapter where it switches to Grendel Seed. So we get Sammael's perspective of her,
And we
and
get
then
Semirhage's.
immediately, yeah. But what's interesting to me that we rarely see is that we immediately get a switch to another character. I'm not entirely sure when I can't think of another time where this happens actually, where we get a character who was in that scene giving their perspective of that scene right away. So we get to see where Samuel was right and where he was wrong with his uh uh with his analysis of Grendel.
Well, the first one in particular is he misreads why she has the people
Hmm.
performing for her. For her, it's a power trip. For him, it's entertainment.
Uh there's also a nugget here with the people from Shara that is really deep, and you're not gonna catch it until like the third read through of the series, probably.
But where's that at?
Um,
171.
yeah, she's talking about the people from Shara, which are like the king and queen. Very, it's like the king and queen and Emerlin and Tamerlin all rolled into one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's talking about them, and it's idle banter. And Samuel's thinking, she doesn't just idle banter. She's trying to do something here. And then on 181, when he's leaving, uh, his brief frown at the harpist should be enough to convince her she had succeeded in her misdirection. So it's it's the battle of wits in the Princess Bride. I know
Mm-hmm.
that you know that I know that you know that I know that you know is what's going on here. Uh, and so he's again, Jordan's doing more than one thing at a time. That Samuel thinks he knows what's going on, but he doesn't know everything. And then we switch to Grendel's perspective, and she thinks that she got him, but she only kind of got him. And we, the reader, are going to know or suspect way down the line what she was actually trying to do here. And Jordan's never going to actually say it. Um, the interesting thing to me, though, is um, where is it? Um, the real question was whether her effort had paid off. Xiaofan and Xiaofei played their strange atonal music, full of complex harmonies and odd dissonances, quite beautifully. Their faces shone with joy that they might be pleasing her. She nodded and could almost feel their delight. They were much happier now that they could have been left to themselves. So much effort to procure them, and solely for this few minutes with Samael. Um, and this is something that others of the Forsaken mention kind of in passing, that the it's not all an act, because she really is uh uh a little bit of a bimbo, a little bit of a, not a little bit, but a lot of a narcissist of, you know, oh, what is that? What show was that? No, it wasn't Arrested Development. There was, dang it, I can't think of what show it was, but there's this great scene from it where you know, this guy's trying to get down in the aisle of an airplane, and he's looking down, and this indignant woman says, "My eyes are up here," and he says, "Yeah, you wore that shirt so that I'd notice your shoes." That there's a lot of that to Grendel, that she's doing it on purpose, but she's also incredibly cunning. So it's not just that she's obsessed with aesthetic. Um, that is a component, but she's also willing to go through a ton of effort, and we won't know how much effort until the literal end of the series.
Well,
A ton of effort.
this is where sociopathy becomes evil. She uses something to her advantage, like you said about the wearing the shirt to get the look. Well, people do that unconsciously all the time.
Mm-hmm.
She knows the effect sexuality has on her, and she puts herself above normal people. So if it has that effect on her, how much of an advantage is it if I use it on other people?
Yes, she's very calculating in that way.
Mm-hmm.
She also, the other reason I like this perspective from her is that um we get this from the outside perspective, and then Jordan confirms, yeah, she's a true believer in this, that to her, so Moghidian and some of the others, they will use strong compulsion as a tool to get their way. Grendel is a sociopathic utopian. She's doing it more than just to get her way. She actually believes it. Everyone and everything in their proper place is how someone describes Grendel uh, previously. And Jordan confirms it here. It's one of the few times where he really, I mean, he confirms a second-hand observation with a first-hand perspective that no, Grendel does believe, she truly believes these people who are slaves inside their own minds, but they're happier, not just better off, happier here than they would have been left to their own devices.
Well, that
She's a
brings the
true
meta
believer in
argument of
her own
happiness,
BS.
right?
Yeah.
Because technically, physiologically, they probably are. Their dopamine levels are through the roof.
Oh, that all of her little pets, they're always smiling and happy, and it's not, I hadn't really thought of this before, but think back to the Dark Friend Tea Party in the prologue to A Great Hunt, and the servants there, Boars, Carradine, is from his perspective, he's looking at them and he's analyzing them, and he notices that they all have like a servant's smile. They're all, you know, come this way, yes, sir. Would you like a drink, sir? But their eyes are dead.
Mm-hmm.
Their eyes are completely vacant and dead. It's just on their lips, and it's creepy. These people, Grendel's slaves, beam with happiness. They
Mm-hmm.
exude happiness and joy.
Well, and I think that partly is a skill level thing. Shamael, he understood compulsion, but Grendel is the grand master of
Yeah.
compulsion.
She she was she was the greatest psychiatrist, psychoanalyst of her day. So
Mm-hmm.
she's combining what she knows of brain chemistry, because she lived in a very advanced society where they had high levels of scientific knowledge, with magic, with a magical way of controlling that brain chemistry.
So
Terrifying.
there's a book. I'm trying to remember the author's name. Let me see if I can get the author's name by the time I finish describing the book. If not, I'll look it up and put it in the show notes or something. But he writes a book about mapping of the brain, and what he talks about, our understanding of mapping the brain, is like the old school astrologers,
Mm.
where they knew they could navigate by the oceans based on astrology, but they didn't know what a star was yet. They didn't know the inner workings of how a
Mm.
star was formed or any of these things. So
Yeah.
he said that's kind of where we are with brain mapping.
Yeah.
But his book that I'm thinking of, he has 19 different scenarios of a person laughing,
Huh.
and apparently this is something that's been done in the past and probably has trouble getting approved to be done now, but they shock a part of the brain that they know to make you laugh, but then ask, because you can work on the brain without the person being asleep because there's no pain nerve endings in the brain. Once you get through the skull, you're good.
Mm.
uh, and they ask the person why they laughed, and they give an explanation, based on where they shocked it. So it was, oh, that horse in the background on the picture is doing this funny thing, but then they shock a different spot. Laugh is the result. So the end result coming out of your mouth is exactly the same every time, but the reason why changed every time they changed the position of the shock. So they knew how to make someone laugh, but what it was actually stimulating in the brain, they're trying to figure out. And now think of someone who's got a metaphysical way to get into your brain and has some understanding of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can make you laugh in a way that is you thinking my joke was funny, versus I can make you laugh thinking that I look funny. Completely different results. And that's where Greandal is. She's that person that understands that and has mapped it, probably, because Age of Legends is ahead of where we are in society, right?
Yep.
So she probably has mapped the brain to a degree that she can make anybody feel anything anytime.
Yeah.
As
And
long as they don't stop her flows from getting there.
it's going to be a very interesting progression, because this dynamic between Sammael and Grendel is going to continue through this whole book. And it's interesting to see, shall we say. But we kind of skip past Sammy there. Does Sammo have anything to say about Sammy and his perspective?
My problem with the writing of Sammael at this point is he did kind of make him pretty simple. And I'm trying to figure out if that's by design or not, because I was actually a little underwhelmed with the writing of Sammael, considering how important he was for Lews Therin's memories, plus, you know, what his effect is supposed to be on the Age of Legends and the current state. So I was a little underwhelmed by him, and I think they made him a little too simplistic with how simple he made his thinking outside of the battlefield. It was almost as if he should have been the first one dead. You know,
I'm going to disagree, and I'm going to point out one thing here, and then we'll put a pin in that and keep looking at it when we get more of these Sammael and Grendel scenes. But it does kind of depend on how you read this scene. Okay, so the bottom of page 179, very bottom of it. So this is where Grendel is talking about the Ayad, the people from Shara, and you know the fact that they're channelers and blah blah blah. So she had come back to it after all. She truly must think he was simple. He decided to plant a small barb of his own. Do they bind themselves like criminals? A look of puzzlement flashed across her face and was hastily suppressed. Plainly, she had not reasoned it out. There was no reason she should. Few people in their time had ever committed one violent crime, let alone more. Before the war, at least. She did not admit her ignorance, of course. There were times when it was best to hide lack of knowledge, but Grendel often carried the practice to a fault. That was why he had mentioned it. He knew it would dig at her and serve her right for the useless shreds she doled out. No, she said, as if she had understood. I don't think that's her playing. I think he actually got her there. And she doesn't recognize, this is what I meant about the battle of wits here, is that they're both partly right and partly wrong in how they assess each other. So he is somewhat seeing through what Grendel is doing here, and he is sparring back, but you're right in that he's very direct, he's very focused. I wouldn't call him simple, but he's
let me
he's not a
qualify that.
creative thinker.
Simple in the sense of the Forsaken, which, I mean, that's one of the complaints, and I think why Scott wasn't very interested in Asmodean. They kind of simplistically derived his character. He was there for the immortality. He was an artist, and as vain artists want to be, they want immortality, whether it's through their work or, in his case, both. Right? Yeah, that's a motivation. It's something that would get somebody to go in a certain direction, but it almost it oversimplified a character. Whereas Sammael was this great general and he wanted to be the greatest, and he saw the best opportunity on this side, or he was going to be passed up on the other side. And that was his motivation.
His other problem is he also seems his motivation is far too similar to the Mandrit's in their jealousy of Lews Therin and wanting to be the best, but Lews Therin is standing in the way. So in some ways, he's like a secondary to Mandrid.
It was the practical Demandrid. He actually knew he was the second best, whereas Demandrid still is delusional that he should be the best.
Because he was born just a little later. He's just a little shorter. He's just a
Mhm.
little less. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Samael was the practical version of that, which
Mhm.
again fleshed out could be really, really good, but I just didn't think we got an first of all, this is our first view from inside his head. So yeah, he sparred a little bit, and
Mhm.
Grendel, even at this point, is simple.
Mhm.
Even through this chapter, the only reason we're talking about her as less simple is because we've read the rest of the books. So
Yeah, that is a good point. But I think you also have to keep in mind the nuggets that we get in Fires of Heaven, which weren't a lot, but we did see him through Fires of Heaven as the Forsaken, conspiracy plot to trap Rand was going on. So this is a carryover from that storyline. This is a continuation of that.
well, I think the big takeaway here is as we do start to flesh these people out, and as we see how the plans went awry in the previous books, it's a testament to how far virtue will take you in a long-term scheme.
Mhm.
Because the reason none of these things are working for these people is not their competence; it's the fact that they do not trust each other one bit.
Mhm.
Not a single one of them has shown any trustworthiness.
Well,
And this is
yeah,
actually a
yeah.
Forsaken that's missing. A Forsaken that everybody trusted is kind of missing. The one that was honorable, but he was still evil. The true kind of devil persona.
It, it's why he held them all together because
Mm-hmm.
they knew he meant what he said when he said it because he had no pretensions. He had nothing to hide because he, unlike all the others, especially people like Sammael, who, at the end of his perspective, Grendel is kind of digging at him with, well, you could just leave Ilion, and his pride won't let him do that because he wants his own glory. He wants his own, it's Tom Brady leaving New England. And it was kind of a mutual divorce because Belichick and Brady both wanted to prove that they can do it without the other. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what Sammael is I'm proving that I can do this without anyone else. Ishii doesn't care about any of that. He's a true believer in the dark. He is a true nihilist and a true believer in the the glory and the ultimate victory of the Dark One. So he doesn't have to have ulterior motives.
But even still, he encouraged the chaos.
Yes.
So
Because it was all part of his, you know, uh uh bastardizing Nietzsche and putting it on steroids.
mhm. So he yeah, yeah, I meant the virtuous one that would lead them, and that was the problem. And that's the ultimate failing of a lot of chaotic type
Mhm.
movements is there's multiple heads to the snake, and all of them want to be top head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Uh, you can go down a rabbit hole, and I've used this analogy before of talking about the top leadership of the Nazi Party, and it was run even when the war had started, it was run more like a criminal organization, more like a mob family than a military. So, and that was partly encouraged by Hitler, who one what was also one of these let's bastardize Nietzsche and put it on steroids. So he was a true believer in social Darwinism in all of its negativity, and he also felt this kept them off balance, so no one would ever be able to challenge him because they were all busy vying with each other. And it led to death and disaster.
Which,
All right.
we look at timelines. You have to know that that's one of the bigger influences
Mm-hmm.
for how this is written out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Uh, okay. Semirhage. So
Okay,
I'm not
what I was getting at, but let me
okay.
finish that point because Samael to me looked like he could have been the character to be that way because he is more straightforward. Where everybody did actually take him at face value, but he ruined that in book 5. So he could have been the one that actually came across as sincere, just evil. And that combination would have made him a more powerful character going forward because everybody would have taken what he said as face value. Where Grendal's trying to play this game with him, it would have been different if it was a game of trying to push him in the direction she wanted to go, but where he was going was where he said he was going to go.
Well, and we get from her perspective, that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to direct him to what she wants him to look at.
But you also still get from her that he's not trustworthy either.
Yes.
So it doesn't give the full effect of what it could have been. And that's
Mm-hmm.
my disappointment with the whole Forsaken makeup, which is, I mean, we needed it to some degree because it is their undoing.
Yeah. Well, but it's not happening in a vacuum, and you can't ignore the impact Rand has. That it's not just their scheming against each other; it is their complete lack of understanding of who Rand is.
Well, but you
So,
look at the other side is you do have these virtues that lead to bad things. Galad is a great example. He's the exemplary of virtue, but at the same time, that's not always what you need at the moment. Uh, and on the other side, you needed that Galad. You needed someone who was where Galad goes bad,
yeah.
and you don't get that.
But so my point about Rand is the one of the reasons their scheming falls apart at the end of Fires of Heaven isn't just because they're fighting with each other and they don't trust each other. It's they don't take into account how Rand is going to react if he finds out that Ravine is in Camelin and what he does there.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with uh Ravine Gabriel not doing anything to quell the rumors that Morghese is dead.
Well, you say them. Moghedian thought correctly, or else she wouldn't have been there.
It's true. She understood it, but she, it's a combination of she understood it, and I think they somehow, through their spies, figured out that Rand had shifted to Ravine, but I think it was last minute. They didn't realize until he shifted his plans and their spies told them. But they did not anticipate at all that he would do that. No, we're getting him focused on Sammael through these attacks and these things that he's doing, so he'll focus on that. And there's actually something that there's a scene with Sammael and Grindel later that'll kind of focus in on that. But Semirhage, to finish up here. However, I'm not sure how much we can talk about her,
Well, that's
unless you
what I
have
was just
thoughts on
about
her
to say. We
personality,
might we might save the rest of our Forsaken talk for spoiler section.
because we
Yeah.
see very little of Semirhage until way down the road. We hear about her a lot. She is kind of a boogeyman, even amongst the Forsaken, because of how Hannibal Lecter she is.
Mm-hmm.
That she scares even others of the Forsaken. So she's much more of a boogeyman than probably anyone else but Demandred, who, he pops in every once in a while, and we know he's doing something. We know he's hidden himself somewhere, and you're gonna keep wondering through the whole freaking series, where the heck is he? And Simmerhaj is kind of the same way. We'll find out sooner where she is, but we we don't see her. But we do get this scene here where, again, Jordan is confirming something we've heard secondhand of she can do terrible things to you, torturous things that normal people can't imagine because she's so scarily smart. She's also very cold and calculating in what she does and how she does it. Uh, the 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 scene with the warder specifically, that she she tortures him by stimulating the pleasure centers of his brain,
Mm-hmm.
and then accidentally overdoes it and kills him with pleasure. And then goes, "Oh, hey, that's interesting." When she, because something to consider that was mentioned kind of offhand earlier is that um, the warder bond is something new. It was something they figured out after the breaking, and was a surprise to the Forsaken that these children, these, barely educated, that know only a fraction of what we know, somehow figured out. In fact, is that Semirhage who's thinking this? That
Mm-hmm.
they somehow figured out something that we couldn't, that we didn't?
But I think where she doesn't get it is from being from that time is it's something you figure out from hardship.
Mm,
And the Age of Legends was very low on the hardship meter until the boar was.
yeah. And then the breaking was even worse. So all of those things they figured out about martial matters and survival in the War of Power got turned up to 11 in the breaking, because it was more than just, you know, survival in war, which is chaotic, but it's ordered chaos. The breaking was pure chaos and became simple, raw survival against nature. All right, so pause there and then move on to spoilers.
Yep. Spoilers and comments coming next.
All right, so big time jazz hands spoilers go away if you have not read yet. Because I don't know why I never thought of this until now. Uh, I guess because we were talking out loud about it, that again, very rarely do I think something is on accident. I think this scene is setting up something that doesn't happen until like the second to the last book.
What's that?
Semirhage is the one that finally truly breaks Rand. And it's it, it is partly due to the bond, because the point where she's starting to torture Min, they've already bonded. So
Hmm.
he's bonded to her as well as in love with her. And that breaks him, like fully. Like he has actually stepped over into the dark because of that. Um, she does it unwittingly and pays for it. But she achieves what the Dark One was trying to do.
I didn't even think of that. I remember the
That
scene. I just didn't, yeah, I
yeah.
didn't put that one together.
I think this scene is the beta test for what she ends up doing. And I have to think that's on purpose, because that's just how Jordan writes.
Well, because especially when it comes to Rand, he probably had everything lined up. Uh, and including he's going to go into this. I'm harder than steel, harder than steel, harder than steel, and he's broken, and this is how.
Hmm.
And so you have to think that that's something that was there from the beginning. All the
Yeah.
little then fill in the blanks along the way.
Yep. Yeah. What other spoilery things did you have?
Well, we started with the importance of mothers, and I couldn't bring up this name yet because of spoilers, but ultimately every girl in his life is trying to be his mother, but one succeeds, and it's not Nynaeve. Nynaeve ends up being like an older sister confidant. It's Cadsuane.
Hmm.
Cadsuane becomes his mother in combination with Cerelia to some degree, but Cerelia is kind of like the grandma.
I hadn't thought of that before. That's a good point. That and she even uses uh motherly language at times. And uh And you bring that up right after we talk about Semirhage, and right before Semirhage breaks Rand, Catwin breaks Semirhage by literally turning her over her knee and paddling her with a slipper.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's able to recognize, and it's great that we get that scene from her perspective, that she is thinking through what would break me. And it was the embarrassment of being treated like a child. So it's a combination of, you know, she uses it there to hurt her. She's similarly motivated though with Rand to help him
Mm-hmm.
because she recognizes her and Cerilia are kind of the only ones that recognize what kind of mothering he needs, especially at that
And
time.
isn't the mantra I will teach him to cry, something along those lines?
Hmm.
And that's where
Yeah.
a mother comes in for a boy. A boy who cries all the time only had a mother, but a boy who has a good, strong male and female influence cries when they need to cry, but is
Hmm.
strong when they need to be. And Rand
Exactly.
Rand never had a mother. He doesn't know when
Exactly.
to cry.
Yes. If you had a uh if you were raised by a mother and you're overly emotional, then you cry at every movie. But if you have a strong father and a strong mother at the same time, then you cry only when it's appropriate, which is at the end of Field of Dreams.
I can't say anything. I cry more in movies than you do, so but I never cried in Field of Dreams.
Oh, that was one of
But
those
then
that,
again, I'm communist because I don't play baseball. So.
yes, that was one of those that got me um when I was younger because of my relationship with my father, and then gets me in a completely different way now that I'm older and it's, me and my own son. So that's how that gets you. Uh the point being there are appropriate times to cry. There are necessary times to cry. Uh you know, and I haven't really thought about this before either, but Jordan is setting up teaching Rand to cry at the end of Fires of Heaven, all the way back there, when he goes into that little shack because he doesn't want others to see him cry. But then he can't cry, and he's mad at himself. He's, pounding himself in the leg. Cry, damn you.
Well, and again, we're in spoilers, so if you haven't ducked out yet, I'm going to spoil the end of this damn book that we're going through now. We see a taste of him trying to learn how to cry, but then we get something in this book that tells him that that's not the way to go. That I need to be harder, and that's his treatment at the hands of
Mm,
the Aes Sedai. He hardens in the chest,
yeah, but
but
it's not just.
unfortunately, he does emotionally outburst. But he only emotionally bursts with anger after that point, which is the kids that end up in alternative school. He becomes a little thug. He can't cry because that's not a man. But at the same time, I have no outlet for
Mhm.
emotion except for anger because guys can do that because you're not doing what I said you need to do, which is my stepdad. He became that guy after the chest.
And it was again similar to the spoiler with Semirhage and Min. One of those, when he was in the chest, part of the extra torture came from his outburst of anger when he saw that they had captured Min
Mm-hmm.
and that she was in danger, and and they were hurting her, or even potentially hurting her, and he has an outburst of anger where he like kills like two or three warders with his bare hands,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, yeah, we know he's been training a lot, but that's still scarily badass.
It's skill backed by emotion, is what that
Yes,
is. Yeah.
it is skill backed by emotion. Um, and that leads to an increase in the torture, a serious escalation of it to, So it's being tied in with all that that turns him, yeah, into a kid whose emotional development is already stunted, and then he gets put into an abusive foster home.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get into that more because now that you've made me think about it, that and we see with Cadswin how pissed off she gets that that these children, these other Aes Sedai have made her work so much harder because she recognizes, oh dear gosh, this is why he's so hard.
Well, and one of the ultimate spoilers, it's no wonder that at the very, 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 very end, one of the last things you read, they call her mother,
Mm, yeah,
which is the title of the Amirlan seat, which is
yep.
what it should be, and which is where Swan went wrong. She had no clue what being a mother is. It's probably where the White Tower went wrong, period, because it's purely female. You have no clue what it is to be a mother.
Purely female, and none of them are mothers.
Mm-hmm. And they're basically go there at such a young age. You're raised by females, no men in your life at that point, other than men that are going to be subservient to you, which is your warder
Mm-hmm. Or actual servants,
or actual
literal
servants.
servants.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All right, what else do we have?
Just a little side note that I thought was an interesting thing that never happened, but I kind of feel that we were left out of something with Grendel and her obsession with owning the best of the best. We never have a confrontation with her and Galad.
Mm.
And I would have loved for her to actually lust after him for a little bit. And part of
I
her motivation of being pissed off at some point and making a mistake, possibly, would have been his rejection of her in some way, shape, or form.
mhm. We do get from one of her perspectives where she's thinking about Rand and thinking that he might make a good trophy,
Mm-hmm.
that he's good looking enough that he might make a good trophy. We do get a miniature of that scene way later with Galad and Barrelane, which is something that's kind of set up and teased, and then it kind of ends up being a disappointment.
Yeah, but I think the buildup of Galad of just being perfection of man
Mm.
realistically, and the buildup of Grendel being the seductress would have played out because you could have had this moment from her perspective where she didn't want to use compulsion to get him because she needed the ego hit of
Mm.
her being able to get him on her own. And then because
That's a
she
good point because my
because she
first thought,
couldn't, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because she couldn't because of some virtue issue in Galad's head, she wigs out and either tries to use compulsion, which is what gives her away, or something that causes her to make a mistake because of the fact that she couldn't get him on her own. I think that would have been a good little side story that didn't
um,
take away from anything else.
my first thought when you said that was, but how do you get around the fact that she would just like right off the bat use compulsion to make him a pet?
Ego.
But I like the idea of the ego that she's going to do this just because I'm so damn beautiful and so damn smart
Mm-hmm.
that I can make him mine. Yeah, that actually is a fun idea.
That's all I had
Um,
written down.
the other major spoilery thing that I hinted at was um I think Jordan is telling us, and you won't know till the very last book or second to the last book, whenever it is, that no, very last book. I think Grendel knows where Demandred is because I think that's what she's doing here. She's trying to pit Sammael against Demandred. And this is one of the ways where I said they're both kind of right and both kind of wrong, because Sammael thinks that he knows what Grendel is doing by trying to divert his attention, but he doesn't fathom the why. And Grendel uh, is, I think where her failing here is that she thinks she's diverted him, but doesn't understand that she thinks he's so focused that if I can get him to take this bait, that he'll focus in on that. He'll get tunnel vision on that. But she's already tunnel visioned him against Rand.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is where the idea of setup and payoff actually can get in the way, because that would have been a great thought, except all the way till almost the very end, you're supposed to have that thought in your head that Tame is Demandred, and the whole Tame Andred theme, and you can't do that. You can't give too much away. This might have been a little nugget for those that are rereading realistically, but you're not going to be on book 13 and be like, oh, I remember that scene where
Yeah.
Grendel had the two people from Shara.
Yeah, the little nuggets of Shara are just so sprinkled sparingly throughout the whole series that it is, and I think that was probably intentioned and expected to be. These are going to be Easter eggs on a reread when you
Mhm.
realize where he is and what's actually going on.
Easter eggs on a reread, but at the same time, you needed Demandred to be the complete out of the blue surprise to need Matt, because everything was laid in stone by the other generals until Shara showed up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and that's part of why he did it, I think, and why it works. Uh, because I think the setup and payoff, even though they're, I think the payoff for Tamandrid is that he's not. I think that is in and of itself a kind of payoff where you realize, oh
No,
crap,
no,
this is a
that's what
red
I'm
herring.
saying. The
Oh,
setup
okay.
and payoff in one place, sabotaged in another, where he could have put little clues in that that Demandred is in Shara for someone to figure out. So here
Hmm.
we just know that, oh, on a reread Grendel might have known, but we don't have a thing that says, well, this should have given us a clue in that direction.
Like watching a mystery movie the second time after you realize that, oh, okay, now I see where I could have seen it. Um,
Yeah,
but
even here you're like, okay, this is a clue for Grendel. This is not a clue for Demandred.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Oh, comments.
Oh yeah, I got him brought up too.
All right. Um,
I agree on the first one
yeah,
because
yeah, about the Balefire. We kind of mentioned that the whole reason that became a point of contention in the Who Killed Asmodean threads was simply, well, not simply, but that seriously reduced or expanded the pool of suspects
mhm.
because not very many people know about Balefire, can use Balefire, would use Balefire. So if he was Balefired, that pretty much says this has to be a Forsaken. If he wasn't, it could be somebody else. Um, who for whatever reason had motive to kill him. Um, but
My only
you know,
thing on others other than the Golem theme would be that Asmodean was limited on his channeling,
mhm,
but he could have taken out someone who couldn't channel.
yeah,
And being a Forsaken, you have to think he was fast enough that even surprised.
yeah, yeah. And even surprised, he should be able to take out a normal person, but the combination of that hesitation from shock and the fact that he's limited would make him dead meat against any Forsaken,
Mm-hmm.
or even any semi-competent current time channeler, really. But I do think he's right that my suspicion is that uh the Dark One doesn't actually have power over your soul unless you give it to him.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, so you're
and that,
saying the thing being cut didn't give him the power over
uh-huh.
it?
So I think the cutting of the black cord meant that he didn't have to be Balefired for because one of the, and I think specifically, Scott, I assume what you're referring to there is the idea on some of the message boards that, well, if he wasn't Balefired, why wouldn't the Dark One just put his soul in another body so he could torment and torture him as as payback for betraying him and a lesson to anyone else. Don't you dare betray me. But he doesn't necessarily have to have been balefired for the Dark One to not be able to resurrect him or even know that he's dead for sure if that literal connection has been literally cut.
Well, what we never got to see was a non-channeler with that,
Mhm.
which is the
Yeah.
problem.
So
Yeah.
we don't exactly know how it works. Yeah.
I thought that was protection from the taint. I didn't think of it as your devotion.
I think it was both.
Well, your devotion gives you the protection,
Yeah.
but to say your average dark friend, uh, that's where I would like to see the comparison. Now, your comments were out of the same order of mine, but the one I was going to go with first says highlighted comment. What makes a highlighted comment? I didn't highlight it. Did you highlight it?
No.
I think Morgase's story gets messed up in that horrible angsty parent story.
Yeah.
And that I do agree, but also I think Morgase's story makes Perrin's story more angsty.
Yeah. Yes, because you have at the same time you have Perrin having the annoying uh marital strife with Fail. You have it's just being mirrored every time you go to the Morgase story because you have her and Talonvor. In fact, it starts off with that. The very introduction of Morgase into Perrin's story is this uh tiresome uh uh unrequited love storyline between Talonvor and Morgase,
Mhm.
which is fine on the surface, fine in principle, but uh it just gets tiresome. It
Mhm.
just gets it is, I think, the weakest part of anything that Jordan himself wrote is
Well,
that chunk there of Perrin's story.
and I hate the word that was used to criticize some of these things. The word used was insta love. I think it's more of the Princess Bride wov twoo wov, which is funny in that movie because they're actually playing on the humor of the idea.
Yes.
You know, but in here we got the Morgase and Tolliver story. That's the whole basis of their relationship was he was in love and she is falling in love. And you kind of get a one-sided merit-based love where his was already just there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just supposed to follow this as, oh my gosh, this is such a beautiful story. And well, that's kind of a tiresome story.
Yeah. It, especially with how often Morgase overreacts to it and how frequently we see that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's one thing to, and we kind of talked about it a little bit when we saw Morgase in Amadicia. We talked about it a little bit, but so we see it there, and it works. It's fine because we see her so infrequently when from that first point where we get her perspective and she realizes something's wrong and she needs to sneak out of the palace and go out on her own to gain support against Gabriel. That uh it's just one of those little nuggets like we get with a lot of the side stories that are all kind of converging, but we don't need to see it as much as we do.
Well, and realistically, from an objective standpoint, Lenny's talk about her finding him, devoting himself, and all of it's not very far off of having a shrine in your closet,
I was just gonna say,
obsessive
I was about
type
to say
behavior.
stalker. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. It, he's not far removed from the Indian guy saying, "Show me your bobs and your veg." It's just, yeah, it's kind of like you said, stalker behavior, but
And because
obsessive
we never get
behavior.
obsessive for sure, and because we never get a Talon War perspective, um, that's all we have to go on
Yeah.
is the outside looking in, where yeah, kind of seems obsessive to a dangerous, let's get a restraining order degree.
You could look at this from a perspective of what happens in if life had gone on as normal, like the world wasn't ending.
Mhm.
uh what happens then? Because he probably Morgase probably finally gives in and maybe has a marriage with Gareth Brine, who they were lovers at the time before
Mhm.
Gabriel showed up. And what is Talonvor at that point? He's a guy obsessed with somebody who's his queen and is married to his general.
Mhm.
That's what he is.
Uh-oh.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I guess you need motivation for your characters, but it's not as virtuous as you would think. It's
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Yep.
it's
Yep. Yeah, and we'll go down that rabbit hole even more when we get to that chunk of Perrin's story, which was which makes it hard to keep Perrin as your favorite character, which I talked about of after Dragon Reborn and Shadow Rising, he was my favorite character because his storyline was incredible. And then he goes away completely for a book, and then we get teased here in the prologue, and it's gonna be a good while before we actually get back to him. And then he gets sent off to the Timbuktu right after that with this really grating storyline.
yeah, I have a meme for that. But the meme is about Sanderson, but it's kind of everything after
Yeah,
this point, like you said.
yeah. Uh, yeah, could have been a golden goose, but they killed it with the message. I mean, that's what we talked about before we even saw the series. Is we had a preview show and we kind of called it just based on what we know about current day culture and creative industry and what we were seeing from the pre-production. Uh, it, I mean, in that, uh, I was either in that episode or in the actual review of the first couple of episodes after they've been released, where I went and I looked up, and the numbers were hard to find, but uh, it, I, I believe the numbers I found were a guesstimate of 300 million copies sold worldwide. Now, and this is a 14 book series, so that's going to inflate the copies for sure, but that's a lot of potential fan base. And you've got an opportunity with his edict of I want my own Game of Thrones, and the ending of Game of Thrones left a bad taste in so many people's mouths that now you can come on with, hey, here's something that's got a huge fan base at the bottom, and the genre has an even larger fan base if you do it right, and they just crapped the bed. In a very similar way to the way they did with Rings of Power, which was hiring people who had no business being in charge of a production this big and this important. Why the heck didn't you go out and, it's like you put together an all-star team and then you go hire a coach who's never been a coach on any level, and now he's your head
Jeff
coach.
Saturday,
Yeah, it,
we
yeah.
have that.
Yeah, we have that. All right. Well, that's all I got. Do you have anything else? Or are you looking for memes still?
Oh, I was looking for the meme, but I'll have it when we need it, I guess.
All right. Well, we will see y'all next time, uh, which is theoretically tomorrow, talking more creation and evolution, this time with more specifically what the Garden of Eden has to say about humanity.
All right. I will see you next time.
All right. See y'all then.